Good evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to News in Focus. My name is Faraz Patel. Jazakallah so much for staying with us. Let's start off with, of course, some positive news on the financial front for South Africa. This is with the inflation rate falling slightly last month, touching a 6-month low and potentially encouraging the South African Reserve Bank to consider cut borrowing costs later this year. Now, consumer prices rose 5.1% in June from a year earlier compared to 5.2% in the prior month, according to Statistics South Africa. Joining us now from Stats SA, I'd like to welcome Patrick Kelly, who is Stats SA's Chief Director of Price Statistics. Patrick, good day. Thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal TV on News in Focus.
Oh, good to be with you. Thank you.
Um, Patrick, a lot of the discussion, of course, is with regards to the fuel prices. For the past 2 to 3 months, we've seen a significant drop within the fuel prices. I mean, that may have just been one of those mitigating factors in terms of seeing quite a massive drop in terms of inflation.
Yeah, I mean, the fuel price is really one of the key determinants of changes in the inflation rate from month to month because it is so volatile, totally dependent on external factors like the oil price, the US dollar exchange rate. And we did see fuel prices dropping in June by 4.6% from the previous month. So that certainly did help to bring the inflation rate down this slight bit. We still have an annual rate for fuel of 7.6%. So that is above average inflation. I think that if we're looking for factors that may be pulling inflation down, certainly food inflation is also a key factor to look at.
Yeah, Patrick, I want to touch on food because, when we've seen the Russia and Ukraine war starting, many food prices, of course, spiked up, least of all being, oil and the prices of wheat, which would, of course, affect, many of your starch products like bread. From the data that was collected by Stats SA, I mean, we are seeing a little bit of a drop with regards to that, which means there could be more money for South Africans to spend from their pocket.
Yeah, so food inflation came in at 4.6% in June. So that is quite substantially lower than we've seen. This is the lowest rate that we've seen since 2020. So you're right, when there have been quite high food inflation levels. So the highest that we hit recently was in March last year at about 14%. So the 4.6% this month certainly is a significant come down from there. Yeah, and as you say, there've been a number of factors that have caused higher inflation rates for food. The external factors like supply constraints caused by the war in Ukraine, but there are other factors that cause that as well. So we've seen quite a come down, particularly in meat prices, prices of oils and fat products. That in some cases have actually dropped.
Transportation, of course, we touched on, the fuel price earlier on. Transportation also a bit of a significant improvement there. What we're seeing, of course, as we said right now, the fuel price is sitting at 22 Rand 89 if you are, of course, on 93. I'm speaking from personal because I fill 93 in my car. So I tend not to get the 95, but I mean, it is slightly higher. With that drop, comparing it to, an April or May price of 25 Rand a litre, transportation had a bit of an improvement with regards to that. Wasn't that the case, Patrick?
No, that's right. So the overall transport index increased by 5.5%. We've spoken about changes in the fuel price, but also you have in the purchase of motor vehicles and some public transport as well, some spare parts. There's a basket of different items there. I think that one of the factors helping to slow inflation a bit now is slowing demand for particularly new vehicles. So the Motor Industry Association, NAAMSA, is reporting about 9% drop in new car sales over the past year. And we have started to see some cooling in inflation rates. So we recorded new car inflation of 5.2% in June. That's down from a recent high of 8.4% in September last year, so not that long ago. And we also see a similar slowdown in used car inflation.
Patrick, when looking at the statistics, and of course, you have to consider where we were before 4 years ago with regards to COVID-19. The post-COVID recovery has been a slow sort of, build up to us getting back to those pre-COVID times. From the data you're collecting, and of course we are, sitting on 5.1% at this moment in terms of consumer prices. Is there a sense of optimism with regards to South Africans looking at their pockets and saying, well, finally we can have much more than what there was, 2 or 3 years ago when COVID really was at quite its high end?
Yeah, I mean, so perhaps just a couple of points.
Mm,
So what we saw during
mm,
COVID was that inflation rates in particular dropped down
mm.
because of, I guess, a drop down in
Yeah.
demand. And although economic growth was particularly badly hit,
Mm,
obviously consumers' earnings in many cases were badly hit. Inflation actually dropped down a bit. What we have seen is that from out of COVID, those low levels, we saw an uptick in inflation, and this was something around the world where inflation levels got to pretty high rates, and have now started to slow. We should remember that even a 1% rate of change in
mm,
inflation is still an increase in prices of 1%. So it's not, in some cases, certainly prices do come
mm,
down, but in many cases, it just means that the rate that they're increasing is a bit slower,
mm.
a bit less than what it was a year ago.
Patrick, of course, the big question comes in, and I know you're not with the South African Reserve Bank, but you can talk from a Stats SA perspective. Uh, uh, of course, the Reserve Bank has kept the repo rate at 8.25% for quite some time. And of course, one may consider that come the next quarter, there could be a sense of positivity. Are we at a stage right now at 5.1% where, there could be a possibility that the, SARB could look at this and say, well, maybe we can consider some sort of a cut? I know there's external factors, you look at the US Fed, and they play quite a huge role in terms of how the global economic outlook will be. But I mean, from a Stats SA perspective, is there some sort of positivity with regards to the South African economy for the rest of this year? And particularly looking at the Reserve Bank, where they can say, well, there's something that we can actually hold on to.
Yeah, for us, I mean, SSA really doesn't get into the business of
Yes, of
kind of
course, yeah.
looking forward,
Mm, mm,
and we also try to be quite neutral in the way
mm,
that we express the data.
mm,
Look, I think we should be cognizant that
mm.
inflation has been in this 5 to 6% range for the last 10 months.
Yeah.
And so that's quite sticky. I think that if the positive factors continue, for example, we spoke about declining fuel prices, certainly that would have a very positive impact on the overall rates of inflation. If we do see the continued slowdown in food inflation, that will also have a very positive impact. But I suspect the champagne corks are not yet popping in the
Yes.
Monetary Policy Committee boardroom.
Yeah, well, interesting to see how that's going to be. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us here on News in Focus on Hilaal TV. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
That's Patrick Kelly. He is the Stats South Africa's Chief Director of Price Statistics. It's a good news with regards to inflation, but we hope that the momentum can carry, because South Africa really does need that economic growth. And of course, that could affect the decision what the South African Reserve Bank makes in terms of potential repo rate cuts. After the break, we stick on money, but of course, sad events that had happened 6 years ago at VBS Mutual Bank. The Stakeholders Forum held a press conference in the week to try and see if they can get back the money, and potentially discussion over resuscitating the mutual bank for a potential state bank. I'll be speaking to the Stakeholders Forum's Robert Lihui after the break. Do stay tuned.